So what's up, everybody? It is a solo episode. You haven't seen solo episodes in quite some time. I've been doing the National Treasures 2023 series where we talk to a bunch of folks about what they experienced at the National, deals they made, stuff they saw, things they liked, things they didn't like. We spent the better part of a month going through that from all different angles. I hope you enjoyed that. If you haven't checked them out, please go check out the last 20 episodes that we did with everybody from collectors to business owners, people from, the head of collectors, Nat Turner, to, the card ladder folks, to Too Thick guys, to, Robert Edwards auctions, you name it. We have a wide variety of guests that we've had on since the National. And I kind of miss this. I mean, there's more space for me on the screen here if you're watching on YouTube, which is good for me because I have a humongous head. But it's I want to get back to chatting about stuff that's going on in the hobby. And I think these next couple of episodes, I already know what my topics are going to be. I know I'm going to talk to you guys about the Fanatics Panini lawsuits and, kind of the layer on top of that, the NFL Player Association and what they did and, what Panini's response is and all that fun stuff. I'm going to have an episode for you guys about that probably tomorrow. And, I also wanted to talk about, my posts about pump and dumps and how, I guess what I'm trying to do when I post things like that about emerging markets. And we've seen it in so many things. We saw it in cards, you saw it in NFTs, you saw it in digital assets, you saw it in, you're going to start to see it in game used. You see it now in the vintage in-person autographs. And a lot of people message me saying, how do I spot this stuff? What exactly are you talking about? Give me some, examples and, real life examples. And I definitely want to, dive into that as well. So those will be your 2 episodes after this one from this week. It's important because, you guys saw the post that I made when somebody, sent me a DM and they weren't so nice in it. Once you start spending some money in an area, in a field, on something, you put, investment in it, even if your eyes start to open up to some of the stuff that's going on, some of the inorganic activity that's going on, let's call it a pump, hanky-panky if you're AIH, you still dig your heels in more often than not because you've spent your money and you want to be right and you want to see, what you bought have value and increase in value. Sometimes the better play is actually, understanding what's going on in that space. And if you have to take a loss and learn from it, we could talk about some of the ones that I've had as well. It's what happens when you start to kind of move your stuff around into type 1s and game used and, autographs. And it's an interesting thing where, a lot of people try to chase instead of doing what I would consider a significant amount of research. Anyway, previews for some episodes to come. And really, it's sort of brain dump, right? Because I haven't had a chance to chat with you guys in a while, and I missed you. Today, it's grading. It's card grading. Is it good or bad? And I'm going to take it from 2 different angles. And we're even going to get into a little bit of, what is and is not okay to do with a card. Which, by the way, my answer is different than your answer. Is different than the guy sitting next to you's answer, and the woman across the street has a different answer. What is okay and not okay. It's something that is very difficult to answer. I've watched videos recently of, Kurt's card care, and I'm amazed, maybe scared. Kurt does some magic on some old vintage cards. I mean, I watched him do a video of a Mickey Mantle card, not a 52 tops, but, a later Mickey Mantle card that had some corner issues to it, had some, dimples to it. It had a little scratch right over, scratch, an indent. Let's call it maybe like a nail imprint. And he did not do anything to the card. He didn't trim the card. He didn't, add anything to the card, take anything away from the card. What he did was add water, right? He put water on the corners and kind of, let it soak in, and he added a little bit of water to that little indent on Mickey Mantle's eye. And, you can see the water kind of seep into the card and start to puff up. And the next thing you know, after a little while, you didn't see that indent anymore. The water had made its way into the cardboard of the card, puffed the card back up, and then disappeared. And there was no evidence of any of this water being on the card. he has other stuff, polishes and, cleans some stains off of the cards. And it really is an amazing, thing to watch. I'd love to have kind of a debate about whether or not what he's doing is an alteration of the card. Is it a restoration of the card? Is it a manipulation of the card? All these fun words. I think, when you live on the fringes, it's easy. The black and white is easy. Nobody should cut a card. How a card came out of a pack, whether it's vintage or comes out right now, nobody should cut, nobody should trim the card. Nobody should be, adding anything to the card. That's easy. You know what I mean? That's easy. But this kind of stuff, putting a little polish on the card and shining up a shiny prism card and taking kind of like fingerprints and oils on the card that were put on after and taking those off, is that altering the card? What does that do? And I mentioned that, one, because I'd love the comments to kind of chime in and let me know, where's that line for you? Where is the line? Where are you drawing the line in what you can and can't do to a card? Could do nothing? Is there a difference of, what if you grabbed the card that was out of a pack? It's the same way it came out, but you put a fingerprint on it. Are you no longer allowed to clean that fingerprint off of it, to clean the card up and then send it in for grading? And I bring it up because grading is the key. And I wonder whether or not, grading is going to have to catch up with this, whether grading can catch up with this, whether they want to catch up with this. Because recently we've seen some fun little stories about modern cards. And I'll give you two examples, two posts recently. Grant from Backyard's Break posted this, and then, C-Blez posted it. I mentioned it in my news segment from the week. If you didn't see it on Tuesday, take a look. It was a very popular news segment. There was a Color Blast, a Trevor Lawrence rookie Color Blast, which is a really cool looking card. White. It's got the Color Blast, it's got him throwing. And if you believe the card owner and you believe the storytelling, you have a little leap of faith with me here, guys. Let's just assume this is true. Might not be. We'll assume it's true. It was sent to PSA for grading, and it was graded a 5, which is a horrible grade, right? Usually a 5 has got to have some sort of, surface imperfection, a nail mark, a dimple, almost like what we talked about with, the Mickey Mantle vintage card. It's got to be something significant to get a 5. A 5 is excellent. Modern cards should not grade 5s. I'll get to that in a minute. Modern cards should not grade 5s unless they have some actual flaw to them. Wrinkle in the card, something, crease, something like that is going to give it a 5. Now, I'm not saying this card was then taken out of the PSA 5 and worked on. I'm not saying, somebody dropped some water on the surface. I'm not saying it was cleaned up. I'm not saying scratches. Who the heck knows? But somehow this card was then cracked out of the PSA 5 slab, sent to Beckett, and it didn't just grade higher than a 5. It graded a gold 10 pristine, meaning it got 3 10s. Better than a PSA 10, right? A gold pristine 10 from a 5. Right? It's interesting. Interesting to think about. Now, I don't know what happened between. Maybe nothing happened. Maybe the 5 was just somebody grading it a 5 because they have too much stuff going on over there. I'd be curious to see if they sent that same card back in now to PSA to see what it would grade at. It's not a numbered card. It makes it pretty difficult for them to say, okay, this is a card we already graded. Now, what if it wasn't touched at all? What if there was no, card care done? What if there was no cleaning done to it? It was just taken out and sent in, and Beckett gave it the 10. Is Beckett grading too high? Is PSA grading too low? Is it a little bit of both? And is the fact that we're asking those questions a condemnation of grading in and of itself? Because here we are with cards that Trevor Lawrence is worth something raw. It's worth more in the Beckett 10. It's worth less in the PSA 5. Now think about that for a second. The secondary market value of the card raw is actually decreased by that PSA 5 and significantly increased by that Beckett 10, and it's the same card. So if it wasn't cleaned, is that way too much subjectivity? do we now have to say, what the heck is going on with these graders? Did we just catch the PSA grader on a bad day? Did the PSA grader actually catch something that Beckett didn't catch? And if all of that is, so subjective, should we really be paying so much of a premium for the third-party grading that gets done on these cards? Now, I don't have a third-party grader sponsorship, but I'd be saying this even if I did. I have a feeling that there was some issue that was noted on this card, and probably it was, smudged out. It was a scratch that was, taken off. It was some sort of a surface issue when it was sent to PSA that was no longer there at Beckett. And if that's the case, it goes back to question number 1 from our episode. Are you okay with that? Is this now an arbitrage opportunity? Should people be looking for PSA 5s that have surface issues on them to crack out, clean, and send in and get a better grade? I kind of side on the grading is interesting. Slabbing is interesting. But it definitely makes me take a step back for a second and think about the premium being placed on these cards in the higher grade when something can be made into that higher grade. Another example, you can see, I think, Cardboard posted some of this stuff, and Cardboard definitely, if you want to take a look at their page, they definitely posted last week, I think, they definitely posted, hey, what do you think about cleaning cards? And they have a Michael Jordan that, was improved, I think, from a PSA 4, the Jordan rookie, to a PSA 7. Creases, it looks like, wrinkles being taken out of the card, indentations coming out of the card, and significant cards. I mean, that adds value. Think about the value being added, 5 figures of value being added on a Trevor Lawrence PSA 5 to a Beckett 10. Same thing with that Jordan. And there was a Jalen Hurts. This one's interesting because it's the same card because it's numbered. I think it was an RPA that got a PSA 4. And it was sent to Beckett and got a 9.5 with a 10 auto. Was that also cleaned? Manipulated in some way? Was there water added to a damaged corner? I mean, those are not shiny cards where you would expect to have like a fingerprint or a scratch or a smudge that can be taken off the card. Again, the same questions, right? The interesting part about it is, now that this is out there, it's out there in the, in the content sphere, we're going to see more of it, right? We're going to see a lot more of this. And you're going to see a lot more, hey, I cracked this out and I sent it here. I cracked it out and I sent it here. And I wonder whether people are thinking about it the same way I am. And I'm going to take a step back. Grading in general. I would love to own a Mickey Mantle 1952 Topps in a higher grade than I own. I would play music in the background and dance to it. But I don't know if I want to own that Mantle 7 anymore. Honestly, I don't. It was something I would strive for. As recently as a couple weeks ago, I was sending messages out, getting pricing on a nice SGC 7 that wound up being sold privately, a nice centered 7. But then I watched these videos and I thought to myself, all right, not an off-centered one that someone's trimming. Take that out of the conversation, guys. We're not talking about that right now. That's bad, okay? But a centered card that's got some damage to the corners. It's got some dings on it. It's got some surface issues. If you can take a Jordan 86 Fleer and go from a 4 to a 7, what's stopping you from taking a Mantle 52 Topps that's a 4 centered and taking it to a 6? I'm not saying all the way to 7, taking it to a 6 by working on it. So if I'm going to buy a 4, a nice centered 4, let's go high and say it's $100,000 card. Right? If I'm going to buy a $100,000 card, right? The 6 is going to be almost 200, especially if it's centered. Maybe more than 200, a nice copy. All right, let's just use 100 and 200 for the valuation on those. Should I pay for a 6 when it's entirely possible that there are 4s out there that can be worked on and improved to 6s? And what does that say about the whole grading thing, right? Here I am making posts about, be careful about the in-person autos and the pop's going to increase and all that stuff. Well, if this becomes more mainstream and more allowable, and it's not something that's going to get flagged as altered by a grading company, then is it fair to assume that eventually all these high-end cards that are sitting in 3s and 4s could be cleaned into 5s, 6s, and 7s? Is that sort of fleshy middle of these vintage graded cards, and other cards as well, but let's just stick with is that sort of like a danger zone now, right? Are we going to see increases in the price of 3s and 4s because people think they're going to be able to take those cards, work on them, and turn them into 5s and 6s? Think about the value difference. Obviously, I use, the granddaddy of them all here. I use the Mickey Mantle card because it's not exactly rare. There are, 4 figures of those out there. But the pricing is absurd. Think about the value there. We're not talking about check forging. We're not talking about a crime. We're talking about somebody buying a $100,000 card, working on it with a little water, a little cleaning, maybe taking some stains off, letting the corners kind of puff back up. And all of a sudden you send it in for grading. Sure, it's a risk. Sure, it's a risk to crack out a $100,000 card. That's why I'm using it as an example. Take it down a notch, guys. People are going to do this with $5,000 cards to turn them into 10. People are going to do it with $3,000 cards to turn them into 8. $10,000 cards turn into 20, et cetera, et cetera. I'm using this as our example here. Think about the value bump that somebody could get from working on a card, not doing anything illegal. They just made $100,000. They take that 4, turn it into a 6, sell it. Now, you're the buyer of that 6. I want you to really think for a second. Think. You bought that 6. How do you feel if it comes to light that it was previously bought as a 4 for $100,000 a couple months prior? Do you care? Does it make you feel dumb, smart, indifferent? Do you say to yourself, wow, I guess I should have bought the 4 and cleaned it myself? Do you say, well, more power to that person. Counterfeiters are, they're talented people also, and this is obviously a talented cleaner, talented card cleaner. I'm not going to say trimmer. I'm not going to say, alterer, because I'm not talking about altering now. Somebody who cleaned up before, made it pass as a 6. Do you care? I think human nature in me, I think me, being honest with myself, not just for the content, I think I would care. I think if I bought the 6 and paid that $200,000, again, guys, just using this as an example, if you want to, talk about a $10,000 card that you bought in a PSA 8 that you found out was cleaned out of a 6, and you spent 10 and the person bought it for 5. If that's easier, use that as an example. Do you care? Because I tell you, I would care. I would definitely care, because I would feel like, wow, this card was just doubled in value, right? And I should have just bought that one, because after all, isn't it the same card? And that's the question, right? And that's what ties this all back together. Isn't it the same card? So that becomes a question about grading itself. And are we putting too much of a value on these high grades, low pop, artificial rarity, I don't call it scarcity, but artificially created rarity in the higher grades of these cards? I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. I just know how it makes me feel is nervous owning any cards in that fleshy middle. Seriously. I think if I were being honest right now with the landscape the way it is and seeing the cards, being clean the way they are, I think I would only feel comfortable in the very low end of vintage. Like if I were looking at a mantle right now, I'd be buying a 2 or lower, or 9 or a 10. But to buy a 9 or a 10, I'd have to win the Powerball, and my numbers they're not coming in. If anybody can help me with that, send me a DM. That would be fantastic. But right now, 9s and 10s are kind of not. I'm not even an 8. I'm not even in that category just yet. But my day will come. But that middle, it has me nervous. And I wonder if it would have you nervous too. I wonder if you're, somebody out there who owns cards like this, a mantle in that 4, 5, or 6, or, hey, call it the Ruth Gowdies. There's a huge increase between a 4 and a 6 on centered ones of those, or any, Maze, Hank Aaron, you name it, those cards. I mean, there's a huge increase. Are you nervous about, what you're seeing here? Do you think that potentially there's an increase in pop? Do you think that increase in pop can actually, hurt the value of some of the higher end cards that maybe you're holding? And then the bigger question, does it make you take a step back and think about grading overall? Because it certainly made me think about grading overall. And when you combine this card cleaning that seems to be kind of taking over here, and you combine it with what we're seeing, the Trevor Lawrence Color Blast going from a PSA 5, same card, to a Beckett 10. The Jalen Hurts National Treasures RPA going from a PSA 4 to a Beckett 9.5 with a 10 auto. The assumption being that those cards were not altered, those cards were not, trimmed, those cards may have been cleaned a little, right? Cleaned, let's use that word. This is one of those things that's different about cards than comics. You have the restored stuff, not like art. This is a little bit of an interesting issue. I wonder whether or not it gets you kind of thinking about grading. And before I let you go, grading in and of itself, is it good or bad? I gotta tell you, I got my grades back today for a bulk order. And I think I did an episode of Delays at PSA. If you remember, I sent this in. It was part of a June special. And I got it in June, and they didn't log it in until, I think, July 14th, right? So here it is. Took a couple of weeks for them to even, say that it's in. But we're at August, end of August here. And I don't even know what day it is. End of August here, and the cards, the grades are in. I don't have the cards in hand yet, or I would show you a bunch of them. 102 cards, and I got 4 10s. Now that is an abysmal, the worst percentage of gem 10s that I've ever gotten. But I'm going to tell you, there's your hook. I expected maximum of 15. And here's why. 90 of the cards were cards that I've owned since I was a teenager. I submitted a bunch of my mid-90s inserts, using this bulk special. I submitted a bunch of my Drew Bledsoe cards to see if any of them were mint, any of them were, 9s or 10s, which would be cool to hold. And some of them were 9s, none of them were 10s. And for grading good or bad, that was sort of a waste, to be honest, sending a lot of those cards in. I was a huge fan of the Pinnacle sets, museum collections, which were shiny, and the Zenith cards that were, rookie roll calls and, playoff sophomore sensations with Jerome Bettis and, Marshall Faulk, these shiny cards. Dufex, a little nod to my friend Mark Zablo at Bleaker Trading, another Dufex fan out there. I sent a lot of Dufex cards. I sent a lot of Zenith Z teams in, and most of them got 4s. 4s. Now, Dufex, it cracks a little bit in some places, sort of looks like a crease. Some grading companies ding that. I guess PSA ding the hell out of them. I guess I'll just keep those cards for myself the same way that you'd have them in a binder, because obviously getting a 4 is not a premium. Maybe I'll take it and send it to Beckett. See what happens. Maybe I'll take all of these cards and send them to Beckett and see what happens. A little video and see. Who the heck knows? Because that's in line with the topic that we're talking about today. But my summary, I'm going to let you decide if card grading is good or bad. But I will throw this little cherry on top of the sundae of this episode. Despite the fact that I got 4 out of 102, which, by the way, if you're listening and you're a Pokemon fan, 4/102. That's Charizard in the original set from 1999, card number 4 of 102. A little card segue there. Of the cards that I got 10s on, those 10s will pay for the entire order. So that in and of itself should let you know that maybe grading is good. Because I took some Otani base cards that I've had since 2018 raw and sent them in and got 10s on them. One, I can't believe I got a 10. It was the gold label, the type 1 gold label. Ian and I opened a pack. We were visiting friends, and you open a gold label pack. It has a gold, framed auto. And we got an Acuna rookie auto in it and an Otani base in the pack. Think about just an amazing pack. And the Acuna, I think we sold it for, I don't know, $80, $100, covered the cost of the pack at the time because it was like, mini box. And I've just had this card in a top loader since we did that. I sent it in because it's Otani. And there are a couple of other ones, Allen and Ginter, that's like a $300-$400 card, that gold label tops, Otani. So, when you're paying, $15 for grading 100 card, I mean, that one card is going to cover, a third of the grading price, or a quarter of the grading price. So it's interesting to see that. I can't completely crap on grading. I got a 2017 Optic Tatum PSA 10, and I did not get any 10s on any of my cards. It definitely had me thinking about, the way that I purchased cards back in the 90s, because there was no grading. We just wanted to get the card. Some of those Zenith cards I paid a premium for because I was just happy to walk into a show and find it. These predated eBay. I was building a set. Now, obviously, I was building a set of crappy cards. So it has me thinking, maybe grading is important, because especially in an era like that, there's not going to be that many 10s. And if, you want a 10, you're going to have to pay for it because there's none of them out there. So anyway, there's full circle on that. I was not happy with my grades. I'll maybe make a video and scroll down. There were a lot of 4s, a lot of 5s, and a lot of 6s, which of course, if you're getting back your grades from PSA, you don't want to scroll and see 4s, 5s, and 6s. But, a couple of hits here and there can make up for the entire thing. And that's sort of what happened. So I guess in that regard, maybe part of my conclusion here is grading is good. Whether it's good or bad in your eyes, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Thanks, everybody.